How are you doing, everyone? Thank you for coming. We're going around the world now. So from wonton soup to tamales, from mochi ice cream to flan, pretty much. We have two really good friends of mine that really know what they're doing in their respective regions. So each of them is going to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about the region that they're working on.
Hello, my name is James Gwertzman, and I have been running PopCap's operation in the Asia-Pacific region for about 3 years now. When we first came over to Asia, we knew there was a lot of opportunity, but we didn't exactly know how we were going to go out and get it. And what's happened in the last, really just the last year and a half, is that social gaming has really taken off as a large market in Asia that Western developers like ourselves can tap into. So rather than just focusing on advanced casual games or RPGs or mobile games, now suddenly social is really ramped up as a possible market. And so what I'm going to do today is share with you just some observations and give you a quick, very fast-paced tour through what's going on in what I think is arguably the hottest market for social gaming and a market that I think most Western developers, especially in the social space, really should not ignore. So Facebook has really won. I mean, anytime you've got a movie being nominated for Oscar awards about a website, you know that you've made it. And posters like this one say it all. But what's interesting is there are markets where Facebook, of course, has not won. This is a map of Facebook usage showing Facebook usage as a percentage of population density. So we're not looking at internet users, we're looking at total population. Yellow is a lot, red is a little, white is not at all, or insignificant. So obviously in North America, it's done. I mean, Facebook is just, it's over in North America, Australia, parts of South America. If you look in Asia, though, Russia, China is a pretty big white splotch right there. That's a big area that Facebook has not yet made statistically significant inroads into. And if you kind of zoom in closer, you can start to see some really interesting spots here. And so, for example, Taiwan tipped over in like 2 months. I mean, there was like no Facebook usage, and then Farmville happened, and then it was like all Facebook. Happened very, very quickly. India starting, red means a little bit. India's just now starting to grow a little bit. Thailand. Interestingly enough, if you look at Malaysia and Indonesia now, I believe, is the second largest country of Facebook users after North America. It's like 32 million Facebook users in Indonesia, which is really interesting, given that English is not actually the primary language for a lot of folks there. Taiwan. But then look up at the top. So Korea, China, even Japan, those are big markets in terms of the gaming space. In terms of total revenues, those are big markets, and yet Facebook not significant. Now, if this next chart here, this is actually showing rate of growth. So if you look at rate of growth, look at Korea there. Korea is dark blue. That means Korea grew 500% year over year. Korea is starting to tip to Facebook. In fact, it used to be Cyworld was really the only social network in Korea that you'd call a PC social network, and frankly, it really wasn't even a very good one in the way we define one looking at Facebook. Facebook is starting to win in Korea. So I'm confident in predicting that as long as you focus on Facebook for Korea, you'll be okay. But really, China and Japan, those are the two big ones that are looking like you can't just get by with a global Facebook strategy. Why? Well, first of all, this is what happens if you try to go to Facebook in China. So this is literally a screenshot from my laptop this morning in the airport in Shanghai. It doesn't work, right? You may or may not have heard of the Great Firewall in the Sky, but China has this thing called the Great Chinese Firewall, and they choose which sites to block. And they do it based on anything that they think has the potential of a social unrest. For example, LinkedIn, which was just a couple days ago on the OK list, just yesterday was blocked out because of a lot of people were using LinkedIn to post about what's happening in Egypt and Libya and a lot of other countries, and China doesn't like that because they're a little nervous about similar things happening there. So now LinkedIn apparently seems to be back on again, but you never quite know what's going to happen with websites outside the country. So the fact that Facebook has been blocked gives essentially an open season for local domestic sites to spring up. And domestic sites are heavily regulated. They have to protect, they all agree to block out certain content. They all have armies of people who screen for sensitive subjects, and that's sort of the price you pay for being allowed to run a social network in China. So a couple if you can only remember 4 things about Chinese social networks, remember these 4 things. Number 1, you have many competing platforms. It's not yet clear who's going to win. Qzone is the biggest, operated by Tencent, but it's not like the only one. I'll show in another slide. There's a lot of different platforms, each of which has a big enough audience to be significant. You have very high DAUs. It's not crazy for a top 10 game on Qzone, for example, to have 15 or 20 million DAUs. Okay, that's a real number. 15 million DAUs, that's like Farmville territory. I mean, that's a big number. But the ARPU is very low. So whereas a game on Facebook might have an ARPU of, let's say, 1 to 2 cents per DAU average, here we're talking about 0.005 cents per DAU. So it's about 1/4, or 25% the ARPU that you'd see in North American Facebook. Heavily regulated. That is probably the most complicated thing for Western companies to deal with. Domestic companies can kind of skirt the gray area. As a Western company, you have to get your game licensed. You have to have a domestic partner do that for you. You can't do it yourself unless you're prepared to go through a very complicated process of trying to find a Chinese employee to set up a shell company for you, and you don't really want to go there. So you have to have a partner to help you get the licenses you'll need. And finally, it's very PC-focused. Mobile's starting to emerge. There's a huge scramble on right now to see who's going to be the winner of kind of the mobile social platform play. But for now, it's mostly all PC-based. So let's look at some of these numbers. Unfortunately, these are 1 year old. I'm sorry, I couldn't find more recent data. But what you can see is basically the percentage of Internet users who use each of these networks. And so there's a lot of overlap, right? If you add up those percentages, it's a lot more than 100%. So Qzone is by far the biggest, almost 50%. They claim 400 million registered accounts, right? 400 million. And I think they even claim 400 million active users, and not just like accounts. Anyway, it's a huge. Qzone is by far the biggest. And what makes Qzone even sweeter is that they have very few apps. They have like 30 apps. So 30 apps, 400 million users means that virtually any app that's turned on Qzone just kind of overnight gets like 20 million or 15 million DAUs. I mean, it's a huge opportunity, and by far the most profitable because of that. RenRen, not far behind. RenRen's interesting because it's the most open of the social networks, and it's the most like Facebook. So RenRen, you can just do a click-through agreement, get an ID, start building your application for RenRen, and as long as you're not trying to monetize it, you don't even need a formal agreement. When you want to start actually making money, then you've got to sign an agreement, and they require you to use their currency, sort of like Facebook. Imagine Facebook said you can only use Facebook credits. All these networks have policies like that in place. And then from there, it actually drops off pretty quickly from there. I would say Qzone and RenRen are the 2 main ones to focus on, at least as a place to start. A couple things that are interesting. The nature of the games are very different. Quick side note, PopCap currently operates 3 social games in Asia. Who here has played Bejeweled Blitz on Facebook? Show of hands, Bejeweled Blitz? Great, happy to see that. Bejeweled Blitz, we took that about 1.5 years ago. We took a snapshot purely as a science experiment. We took Bejeweled Blitz and we got it running on the 3 major networks in the 3 countries. We got it running on RenRen in China, Cyworld in Korea, and Mixi in Japan. And the good news is it wasn't very hard. It took us about a month each, maybe a little bit more. For example, RenRen uses OpenSocial. They all actually use a variant of OpenSocial. Cyworld is the trickiest because of the way they handle their canvas, but it was not hard. And it got us some experience actually operating on those networks. It's not doing as well as you might expect, given how well it did on Facebook. And what that taught us is you really can't just take a game from Facebook and splotch it onto these networks and expect it to do equally well. You really have to tune and tweak it and adjust it to be successful. A couple things that you'll note when you first look at these games. Stealing is very big. It's very popular a very common mechanic in these games is to go and visit your friend's, farm or shop or hospital or, aquarium and steal something from them. So if their crops are ready for harvesting, you can go in there and grab some crops out, and that's considered a fun mechanic. That does not work on Facebook. Some Chinese developers have tried putting those games on Facebook. Users don't want to steal from their friends. They want to help their friends. They want to help the lost cow get home or whatever it is. So that's a major difference. Art styles are very different. And this is not because the artists are somehow not as good as North American artists. The users want, and what will seem to our eyes, or Western eyes, is a very cluttered, very busy user interface. We often show UIs of these Chinese games to other colleagues of PopCap, and they're like, that's crazy. Who wants to play that? But that's kind of the style. Qzone is, and I'm going to now kind of compare Qzone versus RenRen. RenRen is virtually a clone of Facebook. If you're familiar with Facebook, you'll be familiar with Qzone. If you're familiar with Facebook, you're familiar with RenRen. Qzone It's a little bit more like MySpace. For example, does not have app feeds. So there's no viral mechanism for your game to promote feeds about itself on Qzone. The only app feed you get is that when your friend or when you add an application to your list of applications, a notice will go in your feed form saying so-and-so has now added this application. That's the only viral notice that will ever go out. So as a result, all these games have been designed around invitations. They all have huge, elaborate mechanisms in place to encourage you to invite your friends. For example, if you invite 10 friends, you get a huge bonus and a power-up and all this kind of stuff. And also, because of the lack of viral feeds, they rely heavily on app discovery. So app discovery and being published in their app directories are very important. So, and because these are semi-closed platforms, you're really depending on the platform itself to promote your application. So you really need to have a very close relationship with the platform to get them to promote your applications. They all have their own currencies. I'm not going to get into details, but you basically, to buy the currencies, you can use any, prepaid cards in convenience stores and mobile phone billing and bill to your bank account. I mean, there's lots of different ways. The platforms take care of that for you. You have to use their billing mechanisms. That's one of the things that they take care of for you. And then just quickly looking at some games. I'll talk about Happy Tower, for example. Happy Tower is a good representative game. On Qzone, we estimate it had about 15 million DAUs, making about 0.005 cents per DAU on average for about $2.5 million a month. Okay, so $2.5 million a month, not pocket change. That's some real money. I would estimate that if you're a top 5 game on Qzone, that's not a crazy number to be looking at. So that's a big enough number to make this an interesting platform to be looking at. And Tencent, by the way, the company that operates Qzone, is actively looking at Western developers. We know for a fact that we've talked to most of the major Western developers, or I should say most of the major Western developers are talking to them. And I expect you'll be seeing announcements over the next few months as Tencent begins to do more and more deals with foreign content. So this game is an apartment tower. You can basically rent a floor in the apartment tower. The floor is essentially, it's like a Diner Dash or Cake Mania style game. So you rent the floor. You then kind of pick guests. You serve the guests. You can buy items to serve the guests even better. As you serve the guests, you make money. You can visit your friend's shop and you can steal their customers. And you can also visit your friend's shop and steal money that they have not yet collected. And then they've got daily tasks and a bunch of other modes. It's a very complicated game. I could show it to you, but I don't have a lot of time today. But you can, my recommendation is do what I did when I first started looking at China. Put ads in the paper, hire a local Chinese-speaking high school or college kid, have them come to your office, for a couple hours a week and just play games and look over their shoulder. And that's the best way to see what's going on in the China game space. Business models, it's all item sales. All these games are free-to-play item sales models. The items generally do the same thing. They're all about, leveling up faster or serving people faster. This is an example of a friend invitation. What it's basically saying is if you get 5 friends, you get 1 power-up. If you get 10 friends invited, you get an even better power-up. Fish aquarium games, another kind of common mechanic. This is basically an aquarium in a fish tank. You buy fish and the fish grow and you buy stuff at the aquarium and make it look prettier. And I think a number of these games have actually made it to Facebook. Little War is a combination of, it's a very complicated game. Little War is a combination of a city building game, a fighting game. It's sort of like City of Wonder, but even more complicated, if you can imagine that. And there's magic powers, you can level up. Again, lots of different items you can buy. You can buy, materials for building your resources. It's a very complicated game. And then, of course, same thing. This one on RenRen had form feeds. On Qzone, it's just friend invitations. Okay, so that's China. Now we're going to shift over and look at Japan. Japan is a completely different market from China. And so Japan is also a market worth going after as a Western developer. Lots of money to be made in China and Japan. If you're going to think about Japan in your head, these are the 3 points to make. Point number 1, it's all mobile. PC is virtually non-existent. You don't even need to worry about PC. You can make a great living in Japan focusing just on mobile social games and never touch social. Why? Because most Japanese commuters use their mobile phones to access social networks. PC is like an afterthought if they use it at all. Very high ARPUs. So the DAUs are lower. The ARPUs are much higher. As high as, in some cases, $2 to $3 per day in some cases. It averages out to about 25 cents per DAU. So that's like 10 times higher than Facebook. So it's a big number. And then finally, limited social features, and frankly, limited UI. What's crazy about, and we'll get more into this later, what's crazy about the Japanese market is it's almost all feature phones. Yes, there's iPhone, yes, there's Android phones, yes, it's moving slowly towards smartphones, but all the interesting activity today is in feature phones. And it's very complicated feature phones with a lot of, frankly, just HTML. So the UI does not look at all as fancy as you expect, but you're getting really high ARPUs. So it's a nice combination for games because you don't have to spend that much money to make your game, or the production values do not have to be so high, and yet you can make a lot of money. So two major mobile social networks to know about, GREE and DNA. DNA has been in the press a lot here in North America because they bought NGMoko, and they have huge ambitions of using NGMoko as their base to become the social mobile platform of North America. So they're positioning themselves against Facebook in the social mobile space. We'll see if that works. Certainly within Japan, they are the Facebook of Japan in the social mobile space. GREE is their big competitor, and GREE has not been, you have not heard as much about GREE in the press recently. In the West, I think that will probably change at some point. They're both publicly listed companies. They both have oodles of cash. What I listed here are the top 5 games on each of these different networks. They're a little different. My Japanese staff put this slide together. Their take on it, GREE's more like Sony. More focused on third party, easier to work with, more interested in you building apps for their platform. DNA, by comparison, has a lot of their own games on their own platform. It's more like Nintendo. Yeah, they'll take your game, but really their own applications are going to take the top spots in the top 10. For example, in the top 5 are all from DNA, and in the top 10, 8 of the top 10 are all from DNA. So that shows you the kind of house advantage you're up against on DNA. So just some examples of games. I'm just going to flip through these. One thing to know about these games, these are cool games, but they're very simple. They're mostly like one-click style games. We're not talking deep, extensive gameplay here, right? You couldn't imagine farther apart games than the Chinese social games I just showed you and these games. They're very different. Even the RPGs are pretty simple. They're very big in card games, collection games, and so on. So yeah, strategy RPG game, a farming game, a shopkeeper game, a pirate game. On the left is interesting. It's a life drama game. This is a genre I think is unique to Japan. At the turning point of your life, choose between love and job. Yes, that is a very compelling game. And then a planet building game and so on. Okay, so smartphones. What's happening in the smartphone space? So everyone knows smartphones are coming. They're reacting to it very differently. GREE's take on it was to build an emulator that allows you to emulate feature phone games on your smartphone. So you can have your very fancy Android or iPhone and play in an emulator feature phone games. And that's great because you know what? Now we're on smartphones and we're just playing the same old games. DNA is going more of the native app route. They are one of the reasons they acquired NGMoko is they acquired with NGMoko an engine which they believe is magical and does cross-platform, and you can build it once and it runs on every device known to man, which is great if it works. And they're going to be focusing on this engine to try and develop a cross-platform storage for Android. Because the big news about Asia is Android is already big and it's going to be even bigger. We'll talk more about that later. But there is iPhone in all these markets, but Android is by far the bigger platform. PC is interesting. So GREE basically doesn't care about PC. What I'm trying to show in the diagram below here is that basically GREE isn't on PC at all, and they're focusing on smartphones. So in North America, in Japan, they're building a platform. In U.S., they're trying to build their own platform. It's GREE USA, and in China, GREE has partnered with Tencent to try to build a mobile social network for China. DNA does care about PC. They just announced a partnership with Yahoo. And so DNA's mobile service is called Mobagay. Their partnership with Yahoo is called Yabagay. And Yabagay is basically Mobagay on PC. It's on Yahoo. I would say it's off to a somewhat slow start, but it's growing. And it's growing probably at a decent clip. So I would say that Yabagay is quickly becoming a social network worth looking at. And of course, on smartphones, in North America, their smartphone strategy is basically NGMoko. Leverage the NGMoko acquisition, leverage the Plus network to become their platform for North America. In China, they've actually done a partnership in China, and they're trying to, again, go after the mobile social play in China. I mean, China is basically, if you haven't figured out already, China is basically up for grabs in the mobile social space. And everyone is going in to try to become the platform for social mobile in China. So that's the big land grab happening right there. So a couple trends. It's interesting. This is usage. I don't know if you can read these numbers. I showed this to you just to show you the comparison between PC and mobile usage. So these are showing average usage per month of players on these different things. So, for example, take Gree. On mobile, the average player on Gree is spending 936 minutes on Gree, whereas, for example, on Yabage, they're spending on average of 206 minutes, right? So huge disparity, PC versus mobile. You're seeing 180 minutes per month on Mixi, which is one of the top social networks, versus more than 1,000 from Mobage, right? Huge disparity. Why? Commuting time. Japanese users spend a lot of time commuting on subways, and if you go on a subway train, everyone's staring at their phone, using their phone, and that is where all this usage is coming from. This is ARPUs, just to kind of get you excited. This is showing item ARPUs, and for example, Mobage has a higher ARPU than Gree. You can look at Mobage, that's about $3.50 average revenue per user, and I believe that is per month on average. So it's a pretty big number compared to, in Facebook, I think it's like 50, 60 cents, depending on how you look at it. Okay, my quick take on what's going on. Western companies. Zynga is very active in Asia. In China, they acquired a Beijing studio called XPD. They are now thanks to this acquisition, they have over 100 people in Beijing, primarily building games in China for North America, for Facebook. In Japan, they did a huge investment from SoftBank. They've also acquired a studio there, and they're going after the Japanese market. And I believe they're also going after the Chinese market, but right now, frankly, they're more focused on Facebook than China. Crowdsurf's done a partnership in Japan. EA already had, thanks to Playfish acquisition, they got a big Beijing studio from that acquisition, and I believe they're now using that to go after the Chinese market, although they haven't announced anything yet. And they now have a new iPhone studio they've built there. And of course, PopCap, I'll put our name up here. We have an 80-person team in Shanghai, and we're going after these markets as well. This is a screenshot just showing off what our, for example, Bejeweled Blitz game looks like in Japan, just for reference. So my predictions. Here's what's going to happen. 3 predictions. Number 1, cheap, high-powered Android handsets are coming very, very fast. Within the next 6 months, we've already been shown prototypes. Within the next 6 months, you're going to see in China, there's no carrier subsidies, okay? If you buy a mobile phone in China, you're paying cash value, which means to buy, let's say, a high-end Android phone, you're paying $500, $600 US. To buy an iPhone, you're paying, if you can get one, you're paying $600 US. These are very expensive devices, and people are buying them because they're status symbols and they're cool. But it's still out of the reach of the masses, so the majority of the phones in China today are still feature phones. By this summer, sub-$100 Android phones with the power of a Droid X are coming. And so once you have a sort of an $80 Droid X phone, that's going to blow the lid off of the mobile market in China. Everyone's predicting 50 to 100 million Android devices being sold. We already have at least 20 to 25 different manufacturers. These are all like non-branded phones, right? We already have like 20, 25 OEMs coming to us saying, we want to put your games on these phones, embed them at launch. So there's a huge opportunity now on these kind of lower and cheaper, but still very powerful phones in China. So that's one prediction. You're going to see the impact of that coming. It'll still be a fragmented market, but you're going to see a lot of those devices. Number 2, Facebook will find a way to go into China. They're going to partner with someone. They're going to have to kind of accept a certain amount of censorship. I believe it's going to happen. I just believe they can't stay out forever, but we'll see. And then number 3, I already mentioned the land grab that's underway right now in the social mobile space. So that's it. I think, do you want to switch and do questions at the end? Great. Okay. So if you have questions, don't forget them. Write them down. We're going to do Latin America now, and then we'll come back and do Q&A for both of us.
Do I change with this? Otherwise. So I'll just stay here. Does this work?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Is my mic on?
Yep.
Sure? Okay, cool.
Never. Don't let them swing up.
Yeah, that's okay. I can stay here. Okay, so essentially we're going to be talking about Latin America now for about 10-15 minutes. Latin America has been sort of an untapped market in the gaming world for decades now, and the reason being that essentially piracy made PC games completely non-monetizable and sort of a business model that was impossible to make money on. And consoles have a very low penetration, mostly because of import duties and how expensive they are. So online games, and in particular microtransaction-based social games, have an incredible opportunity to tap into the market because they're free, they're completely meritocratic, as we all know. You pay only if you want to. and because they're social. And as we'll see in a minute, essentially in Latin America, most of the activity we do online has to do with social stuff, and offline as well, by the way. So finally, we see a business model, but that by no coincidence has done so well in countries like Korea and China, that also have very low console penetration and very high piracy. Really, finally, there's a business model that can monetize and do really well in Latin America. And it comes at a time when Latin America is growing a lot due to macroeconomic regions, so it's a great time to be in the market. People are getting more, bandwidth penetration, more access to computer, to credit cards, etc. And the other sort of point I want to make before we start is, when you think of Latin America, essentially kind of split the market in half. One half being Brazil, which is a Portuguese-speaking country, is one economy, and probably outside of the US, and except India and China, is the biggest one market, one culture that you can go and try to tap, and as such, it's an immense opportunity. And then you have Spanish-speaking Latin America, composed mostly of the four major economies: Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, Chile, and Peru. 5 make most of the market. So I'm going to be kind of talking about both, but concentrating a lot in Brazil, which is the market where Facebook is not predominant and might be more interesting for you all. So that's the intro. Starting with I'm going to talk about just a bit about internet penetration and growth in Latin America. Essentially, Latin America is the fastest growing region in the world in terms of internet usage. Clearly, it's still a small piece of the pie, but growing a lot. It was, as of February, around 10% of internet users came from Latin American countries, but had the highest growth in the world. And as I was just talking, essentially everything we do online has some social element to it. If you look at every region across the world, Latin America is the highest. If you add up sort of social networking activity, entertainment, including gaming, and email. So essentially, 2/3 of the time, we're not doing productivity stuff online, we're doing social stuff, which makes social gaming, such an appealing proposition. At the same time, as I'm saying, social networking in particular is very appealing. Ultimately, around the world, there's an average of around 79% of social networking penetration. In Latin America, pretty much every country is above the average, with a regional average of around 82%. So social networks are big, and everybody's on them. So this is how the map looked pretty much around December 2007 in terms of different social networks, including obviously Facebook, High5, MySpace, Orkut, Sosnik, and others. Pretty much every country had their own, very fragmented. So it's clearly sort of a puzzle that was tough to master for somebody who wanted to target the region. But this is how it changed by 2010. Essentially, Facebook taking over pretty much all of the region except Brazil, where Orkut prevailed. And I'm going to be talking about Orkut in a minute. Facebook and Orkut, here we're just showing in terms of usage and in terms of time spent. So you can see how much time is spent on Orkut in particular, and pretty much how they won the battle against everybody else in terms of social networking activity. So kind of as a summary of the market situation, we have a 200 million online population with around 82% of social networking reach. So we're talking about a market of 168 million people region-wide. And the two most popular networks being Facebook and Orkut, with pretty much similar, as I said, the market's pretty much split in half. In Orkut, there are around 50 million, approximately 50 million Brazilian users. And in the Latin American, Spanish Latin American countries, if you add them up, there are around 55 million Latin American users as well. In Facebook in particular, just to spend a minute on it, it's also pretty impressive how fast and how dominant it was in the different countries. If you look at the top 8 countries with the highest Facebook penetration around the world, 3 of them are Latin American. And if you continue that chart, I think for top 15, there are even more. So being Chile, Colombia, and Venezuela have, unbelievable numbers, close to the Philippines and Indonesia. So definitely Facebook has done incredibly well in the region, and there aren't yet games targeted for the region with local, there are some games obviously in Spanish, but not with local culture and with an optimized monetization system for the territory. And there are great opportunities there. But, that's a market where Facebook dominates. So what I wanted to talk about in particular is Orkut. As you know, Orkut is a Google social network on Open Social. For some reason, it's done tremendously well in Brazil, and it's still doing well. So just a few slides to look at the market there. So looking at the viral tools available for app developers. So this is Open Social, of course. So there's no bucketing. So that means it's less restricted than Facebook. There's also a sort of a direct link to your email account via Google, so you get all your friend invites directly to your inbox, which makes conversion much better than in Facebook. At the same time, it's less organized, let's say. So there's no games dashboard with notifications. So even though my newsfeed up there was with 3 users giving game invites, they're kind of mixed all together, and there's no specific place specifically for gaming. Orkut, by the way, it's a project that's being managed out of Belo Horizonte, city in the north of Brazil. So kind of Google realized that was their biggest potential. So it became even though it's a Google product, it became very Brazilian owned and operated. And it's clearly more free in terms of viral tools than, it's less regulated than Facebook is. This is their biggest game so far. It's a farming game called Colheita Feliz, Happy Farm. They had 9 million DAUs at peak. Today I was reading that Farmville had 32 million DAUs at peak. So it's essentially a third. And that's kind of very related to how well you can make the comparison of, if your game does X, generally how well you can do in Brazil is generally X divided by 3. It's a pretty good approximation. So as you can imagine, a lot of the big categories in Facebook, they're represented already in Orkut. Farming, poker, mafia, probably soon city building. Nevertheless, there's a great opportunity to not only launch it locally, translate them into Portuguese, but also do local content. So this is a game called Café Mania, which is a restaurant type cafe, restaurant management. And right off the bat, I was starting this game for looking, preparing for the presentation, and right off the bat I get three recipes that are essentially Brazilian, nachos de queso, mousse de maracujá, churrasco. So three recipes suggested to me that are sort of local foods. So that's a good example. And on average, they say that content that's localized and culturally relevant sells 5 times more than generic. So it's not just about translating, it's also about doing local content. There's a great opportunity in doing that. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about payments. In Latin America, e-commerce is just starting. It's at its nascent stages, but it's growing a lot. It's grown about 1,000% in the last few years, but it's still at less than 10% of what the U.S. e-commerce market is. And this includes, obviously, both Spanish-speaking Latin America and Brazil. However, it's growing, at big double digits every year, and it's going to continue to do so. So there are, great opportunities to take advantage of that via social gaming. This is a recent report that was recently published that sizes the Latin American gaming market about $328 million today, where Brazil is about half of it, and the rest, the other 3 major countries are Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, and Chile and Peru are missing, but they're still relatively similar to Argentina. So this is growing at double digits, and there's just very few companies servicing the local market. So that creates a very interesting opportunity. In terms of payments, cash payments make up to 27% of payments in Brazil for social games. There's still, around Latin America, e-commerce is still around 60% cash. You have to think that around, approximately 44 to 50% of the Brazilian population have no access to credit, no relationship with a bank. So you definitely need to be ready to integrate with solutions that allow you to charge to monetize via cash. The great thing about cash is that obviously there's no chargeback. The fees are relatively small, around 4%. And for users, it's obviously very, very comfortable. And by the way, without it, you're kind of missing half of the market. There's something in particular in Brazil called the boleto bancário. The boleto bancário, which is a note. It's used for all kinds of payments of everything from university tuition to. It's a mechanism by which you essentially print. If you're playing an online game, you print the boleto, and you can go pay in any bank you want, and actually I think also in pharmacies and different retail stores. So it's completely necessary to if you want to do well in Brazil to have this type of payment implemented. At the same time, it has big drop-off rates because you obviously have to print it and go to the bank, and then around 24 hours after that, you get the credit back into your account notified via email. So it's a pretty interesting, sort of unique payment system that's super important to have for the Brazilian market. And this is just some pictures of retail stores promoting social games, in particular Coleita, which is published by a company called Mentes. What I wanted to also sort of talk, sort of in summary, is sort of your average Latin American user. You have to think that they're pretty young. It's a young population. So they also, half of them are not going to have any credit card, debit card. Even if they do, something that I didn't mention before, they would need, even if half of the market is credit cards and debit cards, they need to be sort of local, issued by local banks. If you try to buy with an international credit card, most often than not, they're going to be rejected by some of the gateways. So even accepting locally issued credit cards is key. But going back to the to the users, they're young, definitely. They tend to play during the week. So something to have in mind, in Latin America, a lot of the social activity happens offline. So we're definitely, everything online, 2/3 of our time online is social, but at the same time we do a lot of stuff offline. So, for one of our games, it was super interesting because when we were looking at the time of play during the day, the peak for the US was generally after office, whereas for Brazil, for example, it was completely the opposite. It was during the day. After office, people just go offline, I guess, go off to do their things. Same thing with the holiday seasons. The holiday seasons in South America, it's summertime. So people just get off their computers and go out and party and have a good time. In the US, it's winter. So, we had record peaks for our US audience during the holiday season and record lows for the Brazilian and Latin American audience. So those are some things to have in mind. And also the Brazilian consumer, now that I have that guy up there, they love free stuff. They're starting to have much more purchasing power. So if they can pay for stuff they like, they'll eventually do it if you give them stuff on their language and sort of target it to their culture. This is just a quick show of some example of social gaming companies in the region. We have sort of a mix of companies targeting specifically Latin America, and for example in development like Vostu, us at Atakama, then some companies doing sort of development from there for the world. The only US player so far that, as far as I remember now, that has sort of made an acquisition was Playdom with the acquisition of 3 Melons, a developer based in Buenos Aires. And then on the right-hand side, you have companies that are working on distribution of social games and payments. Mentes being a major player in distribution of social games in Brazil, Dinero Mail, an e-commerce platform that is regional. Wall is a huge portal and traffic generator in Brazil. And Que Pasa, a social Hispanic social network starting to get into distribution as well. And that's it. Open for questions.
So there are microphones in the back, and if you guys want to just go up to the microphone and ask us a question, we will be happy to answer it for you. We've covered all your questions. Excellent. Yeah, in the back.
Any information about Indonesia?
Sorry, what's the question?
Any information about Indonesia?
Indonesia. It's Facebook. I mean, it's going Facebook, but it is you do need to support local language there, and I don't personally have any experience with Indonesia. Maybe someone in the audience wants to comment. Sorry. Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah.
So what about China and piracy? Like, do you bring your game there? Is Renren going to just clone something that looks exactly like Bejeweled, call it like something that sounds like Bejeweled, and then just jump all the traffic to that? Have you thought about that, or is that a worry?
So piracy is rampant in Asia, same as it is in Latin America. So the reason we like social games, of course, is because it's online. So one form of piracy is eliminated. It's replaced by what in China is called shenzai, or kind of bandit manufacture, instead of rip-offs, right? It's a thriving rip-off culture in the gaming space, or frankly, all walks. I would say, yeah, we worry about it, but not as much for a couple reasons. Number one, we have strong relationships. To be successful, you need to have a strong relationship with the platform. If you have a strong relationship with the platform, they will help you kick off the companies that are ripping you off too blatantly. So, we've seen a variety of, for example, Plants vs. Zombies rip-offs appear. And actually, two things have happened. Number one, the fans themselves have said, we don't want this. We actually want the original thing. When are you, PopCap, going to finally give us a Plants vs. Zombies online game? We don't want this kind of rip-off stuff. And number two, the platforms themselves have been helping us address that. So
we actually had a game in China that was using our actual assets. So it's like a different level of not just copying it was like literally like our assets. So
actually take the source code and
like literally take the same images, our assets, and using them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my only response is if you're not there, if you're like this Western company sitting in North America somewhere and you don't have a local presence, yeah, there's not much you can do about it. You can try to go to court, and we've looked at it, and you're not going to win. So, but if you're there and you've got Guangxi, you've got relationships, you're an active player, you're going to see a lot less of that. So my only answer is the best way to defeat the piracy is actually go and be in the market and stand up for yourself.
Thanks.
Yeah. Over here.
Now Facebook make Facebook credit like compulsory payment. So how Facebook gonna get the player in Asia and South American to charge in Facebook credit?
So you're asking how is Facebook with Facebook credits going to play in Asia? My understanding is that Facebook is moving to expand the range of payment mechanisms they support in Asia. I don't have a timetable. I don't know exactly what it is, but we've been told through our contact with Facebook that they are moving to add more and more local payment systems. But you're right, they have to support them.
So the company that making money on social game, let's say in Indonesia right now, would their current payment channel being cut off?
Yeah, I don't know. We're not in that space myself. I don't know. I would imagine that Facebook will look tolerantly on companies continuing to use their own local payment systems in Indonesia and markets like that until they support it themselves.
Thank you.
But I can't quote that. Over on this side.
Yeah, this is a question for Esteban, actually. Two questions. First, Mexico, it's a great place in terms of consumer of these type of games and Facebook. What is your take on how and why Mexico is not developing as much as Brazil or Argentina or even Colombia and Venezuela. What is happening there from your perspective? And number two, what is your prediction in terms of the big publishers taking over the social gaming landscape of Latin America? Differently to, for example, EA or other companies might be maybe planning to take over the Asian territories.
Sure. No, totally. I think Mexico is the next frontier after Brazil in terms of market size. We've seen in the sort of offline world how well, for example, the Xbox did. The Xbox launch was in Mexico, and that talks to an audience that's very avid for gaming, and at the same time, very sort of casual gamers. So, games that are very casual and do very well in Mexico. The reason it hasn't done so well yet probably is because nobody has focused on it. Clearly, Latin America, in a way, it's more complex than Brazil because you need to divide the pie by 4 or 5 countries to get the bigger chunk of the market. Whereas Brazil is just one country, one culture. But I totally see an opportunity in the very near term for Mexico. The second one is whether the big publishers, what's going to be their approach to the region. I think it's just a matter of time. I mean, we were just talking before the talk with James that just a few years ago when you were thinking of Asia, probably 6 years ago Asia wasn't even in the map for any Western game developer. Then it sort of became in the map, but all it was a place to outsource your development to develop your games up here. And now everybody's developing games for Asia. So it's a matter of time until the markets mature and all these companies start to focus. They clearly take bigger markets to lower markets. So I think Latin America is going to become a major focus in the next couple of years for all these companies. And if you look at the on average, sort of all multinational companies, the Fords of the world, the Unilevers, the Procter & Gambles, the Cokes, generally around 15% of the revenues come from the region. In Latin America, there's none of that. If you look at what's EA's, Zynga's, Activision, what's their share of revenues coming from the region is probably close to 0. So that's going to change eventually. Once the market matures and once they expand internationally, it's eventually going to get up there.
I will say this. I mean, PopCap now in Asia, we're up to now more than 10% Asia. And if you add Europe into the mix, we're already almost 25% outside of North America. So we're already seeing real revenues from these regions. And we've been more than doubling year over year for the past 3 years since I've been there. And we are forecasting to double again this year, and hopefully again next year. We'll see. But it's starting to come from real numbers.
Good. Thanks.
Over here.
Yes. Hi. This is a question for James. I would like to know if PopCap is willing to launch its products or promote them more in Latin America.
So the question is, when is PopCap going to look at Latin America?
No. If you are planning to launch PopCap products in Latin America.
Yeah.
Or promote them more, maybe.
Well, we now have just recently my biz dev guy from Asia has now moved over to focus on Latin America. So we actually now have someone focusing exclusively on Latin America. So we certainly are looking at it, but we have not yet, for example, opened an office, and we don't have any immediate plans to do so.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately.
Repeat your question.
Sorry. Yeah. So to talk the landscape about mobile gaming and PC offline. Oh, PC online. So I concentrate a lot on web. I think mobile, there's a huge opportunity. Clearly, the iPhone is a very expensive device for the region, but I think there's, just like James said, there's a huge opportunity on Android, especially as these cheaper handsets start coming out. There is an avid sort of development community, I know, for mobile, for smartphone games, but there's still not as big of a consumer market because of that.
Back here.
With regard to social games on mobile phones, how does growth on an ARPU basis compare Asian countries versus the US? And what are the other trends and the types of sources of revenue that you see?
So I think the question was, how does the growth of social gaming on mobile phones in Asia compare to North America? the thing about Asia is every market, I mean, Asia is not one thing. Asia is like 10, 15 different markets, each very different. In Japan, like I said earlier, it's all mobile. I mean, it's like 90% of the revenue is mobile. In China right now, mobile's very small, but everyone thinks it's the next big thing, and everyone's betting on it as the next big thing. In other markets in Asia, Korea, for example, mobile tends to be ironically very hardcore. It's very funny. In Korea, all the revenue of mobile phones is like these really hardcore RPG games. You don't yet see the kind of strong casual presence. I mean, there's some casual games, but we were surprised it's not what we expected. We've been told by our partners, and we believe that's going to change, that smartphones are going to tip that in the balance. And so we're making a lot of bets right now in Korea on Android, actually, and some other platforms. So we think that's tipping. And right now, frankly, that's my laser focus. Southeast Asia and other markets are there, and they're big, and we're just not. We have our hands full with Northern Asia. 2012, that's our Southeast Asia focus. So, yeah. In front here. Yeah, so the question is Asia is very gaming. They love gambling. They love gaming. The question is, are there any developers in Asia focusing exclusively on gambling and this kind of gaming, right? The short answer is it's heavily regulated. So it's not like, for example, the UK and some other markets in Europe where online gaming is really taken off because of relatively lax regulations. For example, in China, it's banned. Macau, it's allowed, and Macau is trying to establish themselves as a player in the space. There are some, I guess the really simple answer is we have not seen, frankly, a lot of developers focusing on online gaming per se. There are companies focusing on offline gaming that provide, for example, the slot machines for the casinos in Macau. If you go to Macau, it's not like going to Vegas. I mean, the slot machines are all like Golden Dragon this and Golden Dragon that. I mean, it's a very local set of machines, but they're locally developed, but not for online. One more, okay, last question. Last question. Going once. Going this. Okay, well, hey, thank you very much for coming here, and have a great rest of the conference.